Welcome to the Hangar Z and Helicopter Podcast Mashup, brought to you by Vertical Helicast and in partnership with Vertical Valor Magazine. Where do you see MD tomorrow and ongoing?
So the year after next, 2027, MD will be 80 years old. We started as Hughes Helicopters in 1947, so we have a long history like many of the other rotorcraft manufacturers. Our vision is to be around for another 80 years and continue to be known as the hot rod of the skies. And so I think that's really the theme that we're doubling down on right now. It's often been said that we're the Ferrari of the skies. I like to change that paradigm a little bit. We're the Shelby AC Cobra of the sky.
This two-part series is unique in that we have an opportunity to talk with the CEO of MD Helicopters, which is co-hosted by my friends and coworkers, Halsey Scheider, host of the Helicopter Podcast, and Brent Bundy, who is a retired Phoenix PD pilot and senior correspondent at Vertical Magazine. In this engaging conversation, we talk with MD Helicopters CEO Ryan Weeks. Ryan Weeks has a diverse background that began with a passion for cars and motorcycles, leading him to pursue a degree in mechanical engineering. He started his career with Textron's automotive division, where he gained valuable experience. Over time, he transitioned into product line management and earned an M.B.A. to enhance his strategic skills. Ryan's career path took him through various roles at Textron, including a significant stint at Bell Helicopter, where he contributed to product development and aftermarket business improvements. In 2019, he joined Honeywell Aerospace, and by 2022, he was recruited to help MD Helicopters improve their aftermarket operations. His leadership and strategic vision have been instrumental in shaping MD's path. During our conversation with Mr. Weeks, we discussed the challenges MD faces in aftermarket and supply chain issues. The discussion also delves into leadership insights and the importance of regular product updates to maintain competitiveness in the helicopter industry. We discussed the exciting developments at MD Helicopters, a company with nearly 80 years of history. We'll discuss the revitalization of the legendary MD 530N, now equipped with the powerful Rolls-Royce C30 engine, as well as the new MD Super D20B upgrade that boosts performance and payload for legacy MD 500 models. We'll explore how these advancements are delivering more power, greater payloads, and improved safety even in the toughest environments, ensuring the fleet remains mission ready for years to come. Stay tuned as we break down what these upgrades mean for operators, maintenance crews, and the future of helicopter aviation. This podcast was recorded on Tuesday, October 21st, 2025. At the time of this recording, the FAA had yet to approve the first of the STCs associated with the fielded fleet upgrades discussed in this recording. 3 days later, the FAA approved the STC for the Super D20B, and the first Super D20B went into service on Wednesday, October 29th. Thank you to our sponsors, BLR Aerospace, Astronautics Corporation of America, and Precision Aviation Group.
Welcome to the Hangar Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. The Hangar Z Podcast is the first and only podcast dedicated to promoting and exploring the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Stand by here. Looks like you're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, through the shotgun, through something out. Grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
It's time for your Heli Life giveaway buzzword. Listen up and remember this word because you'll need it to enter for a chance to win exclusive Heli Life gear. Ready? This episode's buzzword is backup. Visit contest.verticalhelicast.com to enter the buzzword.
Hey, welcome to the Hangar Z and Helicopter Podcast. It's a mashup today. I have the honor and privilege of having Ryan Weeks with us to talk about MD products and all the cool things that they have going on over there. In addition to Ryan, got Mr. Brent Bundy. How you doing, sir?
Very well.
You've been around a lot of our podcasts, but never really in them. So it's pretty cool to have you actually sitting here.
I've got that face to be behind the camera. That's right.
Halsey, thanks for joining us.
What's up, guys? Excited to be here. Really excited for this conversation.
Yeah, this is always a good conversation when we get to talk to folks at MD. MD is one of those products which I've experienced. You know, you sit in, you strap into an MD helicopter, and there's this, I'll say, cult following for folks that love MD. If you get a chance to fly one, you'll never forget that. And that loyalty that I think comes with the MD products is what makes these conversations so fun. So, Ryan, thank you for taking the time out of your schedule, your busy schedule, to sit down and have a conversation with us.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having us.
You've entertained Brent a couple times over the last year or so. How's that been? Are you okay with that?
It's good. Yeah, Brent.
You can be honest.
He's probably told you the story before. We met in New Zealand a few years ago when I attended the first Great Kiwi Fly-In, and not only did we run into each other there, but then we saw each other down in Invercargill, like 2 days later, and we just kept bumping into each other. So yeah, I've known Brett for a while now.
Yeah, love hanging out with Brent. Always have a good time. Being overseas with Brent can be dangerous. I'm glad you survived. Do do you want to preview briefly the two articles that Brent wrote recently? First of which was released in July. It's called Supercharged. We flew the new MD Super D20B, and then just this month in October, wrote another one called Power Restored. The MD 530N returns with new strength. Brent, if you could just talk through the inception of that concept a little bit and a little bit about your experience at MD.
Well, it's an easy one for me because it kind of takes me back to my roots. The MD products I was fortunate enough to learn to fly helicopters in the MD products, the MD 520N specifically. I don't think there's a lot of people out there in the helicopter world that can claim that a turbine aircraft, especially a 520N, was what they learned to fly on. So, when the opportunity came up for me to go back to Phoenix and back to the MD factor, I've spent a fair amount of time in the past. I jumped at that, and I don't have a ton of time in the entire MD lineup, but I have flown every model that they offer, and to get back into a D model with the rather significant upgrades that the Super D20B package offers. It was very exciting for me, and then to experience it firsthand. And while I don't have a lot of time flying D models and E models, I have spent a lot of time with other pilots flying them, whether it's mostly on stories that I've done for Vertical Magazine, whether it be logging operations or more specifically power line operations. And oftentimes one of the biggest complaints is needing more power. You can rarely have too much power in this airframe, in any airframe. And so to hear, I don't want to call them complaints, but to hear wish lists of these pilots globally that I've flown with, and then to see MD recognize this and listen to their customer base and say, hey, we can do something about this. We can offer these pilots who love our product, like you mentioned, it's a cult following, to be able to offer them these upgrades. I think that says a lot about the company and their recognition of their customer base and their willingness to provide what these customers are wanting. So to go out there and fly the Super D20B, that was a great experience. And then to return for part two of, we'll see how many we continue this with, the 520N. I've got a fair amount of time flying the 520Ns. I flew them for several years with the Phoenix Police Department. And I love that aircraft. It's one of my favorite aircraft to fly. But again, there was always that wish of, we need more of this. And in this case, we need, and Ryan will get into it with the limitations that we would experience, specifically TOT limitations. And to now be able to get into the aircraft that we configured the way we wished it was back in the 90s and 2000s when I was flying with the C30 engine in them, that was just, that was the ultimate wish list for us. So for me to be able to go back and fly both of these aircraft, it was an incredible experience. And hopefully I conveyed that in the articles, and hopefully people in the MD community recognize what the company is doing to support their wish list.
Those two articles and some videos are available on verticalmag.com. Well done, Brent, there. Ryan, you had Brent out twice. Is it true there's a restraining order issued against him now?
Not yet.
Thanks for having us out there. Always a pleasure to see what you guys are doing at MD. Brent, just real quick, you mentioned you learned to fly in the MDs. Talk about your background and how you essentially got to where you are now with Vertical.
Yeah, I'll keep it as quick as possible, but I spent 30 years with the Phoenix Police Department. I spent 8 years as a patrol officer, 2 years as a detective, and then in actually 2 weeks before 9/11, I transferred to the aviation unit with the Phoenix Police Department. Spent the next 20 years flying helicopters of various makes and models for them, and I was also a fixed wing pilot I coordinated our training program for new tactical flight officers who came into the unit on both fixed wing and rotor wing side of the house. During my time there, I've been a lifelong photographer, and during my time with Phoenix PD and the last 10 or so years I was with them, I began doing aerial photography and writing for a magazine. And then about 4 or 5 years, I retired from the Phoenix Police Department in December of 2020. And shortly after that, I was given the wonderful opportunity to come to work with Vertical Magazine. Mike Reno invited me over to join the team, and so in my retirement, this is my fun gig in retirement to write and do photos for Vertical, which is just a great experience because it allows me to do one of the things I love to do, aerial photography, and I still get to, just like with this MD experience, I still get to fly aircraft from a variety of operators all over the globe, and it's a wonderful experience.
Yeah, it's been an honor to work with you since my time with Vertical, being a part of the Blades of Valor tour, being on the road together. That was a blast. Looking forward to 2026 and all the other events we get to do. Halsey, you talked about a little bit of your experience prior to the call. Talk about your experience, how you got to where you are, and any parts you want to contribute to this conversation.
Yeah, well, first off, thanks for having me on, guys. Excited to be here, Ryan. Pleasure to meet you, and I'm excited. I use the podcast as a platform to educate myself on what's happening as well, and so I'm just lucky that I get to be here while it's happening. Look, I'm not all that important in this conversation. In fact, Ryan, I hope there can be an open invite sometime for me to come and fly the MD. My 1 hour of MD time. Unfortunately, my flying career never put me in the cockpit of an MD. I was working line service. I think I was 18 years old, had about 20 hours of flight time all on the Robinson at that point. And I was working line service at this flight school charter operation, FBO. These wealthy guys come in on a private jet, and they're like, hey, can you drive us around Oregon and give us a tour? We'll pay you good. Okay, sure. I got off work. Paid me like $500 cash. I mean, it was like awesome. I felt like I won the lottery. And they said, hey, you all work at that charter department. Can you get me a helicopter ride to the coast tomorrow? And I tried to go through that company. They couldn't work it out. So I farmed it out to Precision Helicopters in Newberg, Oregon. And they were operating the 500 at the time. And so these guys got their helicopter ride. I actually drove out to the coast. I drove around the coast when they got dropped off in the helicopter. And I convinced the pilot. I said, hey, I organized this ride for you. I mean, that has to be something, right? I have to get something from that. And so he goes, yeah, come on out. So at about 20 hours of flight time, I got to go and get my 1 hour of MD time. And I'm grateful for the experience, but I'm also sad because I didn't know enough to really fully experience it, if that makes sense. So, Ryan, I hope if anything, I can come down there and do some flying with you guys. And really now, of course, as a helicopter pilot for many years, experience the MD firsthand. So I'm excited for that. And look, I had the opportunity to podcast with your predecessor a couple of years ago at HAI at that time, still HAI. Now, of course, Verticon. And, one of the things that stuck with me is MD. It's just that iconic brand. It's like the recognizable brand, even if you're not in helicopters, right? I think when you talk about helicopters and you're a non-helicopter person, it's MD. It's this iconic brand. And so I guess my first question to you is, how does a guy work his way into now being at the top of what I consider to be the most iconic helicopter brand, that's out there?
Well, first, you're welcome to come anytime, and same for you, John. And maybe you guys can coordinate with Brent the next time that he comes out to fly, would be the Super D20R, and, fly one of the souped up, versions, if you will.
Yeah.
Sign me up. Yeah, let's do it.
So back to your next question, dumb luck, I guess. And it's been a long and winding career. And, I didn't necessarily shoot for this spot in this company, but it just kind of came together. So a little bit about my background. I grew up a gearhead with a passion for cars and motorcycles, and I enjoyed math and science. So I figured a mechanical engineering degree would serve me well in some capacity. So I got a mechanical engineering degree, and then I landed a job with an automotive division of Textron. you guys probably know Textron owns Bell and Cessna, and it's a large part of an aviation company, but it's a multi-industry company. And at the time, this is back in the early 90s, Textron was like 60% automotive. So we did everything from, we were at one point the largest injection molder in the world, interiors, exteriors. And I ended up landing with a division that did seating products and windshield washer systems. And so I was hired on as a design engineer, but they said, we'd like for you to be a production supervisor for 6 months to gather that experience. And, you'll thank me for it later kind of thing, which in hindsight I did, because it gave me experience with managing teams, with production planning, supply, demand, quality, inventory management, all that good stuff. So I did that for 6 months. Then I was a design engineer for 6 months, and this was in a factory in Tennessee. And they said, hey, the sales department up in Detroit needs an applications engineer, a technical liaison that can accompany them to the OEMs when they're trying to sell the product. Would you be interested in that? And I said, yeah, sure. So I went up there, and, that got me involved in sales and marketing, the automotive design process, the automotive certification process, quality systems, warranty processes, and even because I was in seating at that point, human factors and ergonomics. And so that led to an interest in product line management, mostly due to the strategic piece of that, how do we beat the competition kind of thing. So I figured it would serve me well to get my M.B.A. So I went to night school for 4 years and did that. Around that time, I was appointed the product line manager for a $30 million a year portfolio of seating systems. And during that time in automotive, I was fortunate enough to travel the globe with Cadillac and GM, working customer events and doing focus groups and learning what voice of the customer was all about. So, that also, we started to, look into other industries, including heavy truck, the air transport industry, and home furniture. So, again, this is all just part of the, what unfolded, as I went down the road. Later, I moved into the marketing department at Textron Automotive, and that led to direct interaction with sales and marketing leaders from all around Textron. In 2002, Textron started Six Sigma, and I was asked to serve as a full-time black belt for 2 years, developing and implementing sales and marketing best practices across the enterprise, which I did. So the first assignment that I got, along with a colleague of mine, was can you guys redesign the recruiting and staffing process at Textron because it's broken? And so HR experience, right? So that was quite a long project. And then we worked other projects from customer satisfaction and loyalty measurement to value pricing to customer segmentation. So again, just expanding my breadth of experience. And then after 2 years, you redeploy into a business unit. So I redeployed into Jacobson, part of the industrial division. And Jacobson makes high-end turf care for golf courses and municipalities, including golf courses such as Augusta National and Pebble Beach. So due to my automotive design and testing experience, a year later, I was asked to assume responsibility for engineering and product management. So I thought I had left engineering behind, but then it came back and, consumed me again. So now I was in charge of engineering. And, it wasn't only a situation in which the product lines needed a much needed overhaul, but, the engineering function also was kind of in disarray. We needed better talent and skill. It was kind of a cultural, change that we had to make too. So that was a very challenging and educational and rewarding process along the way. So we got things turned around over the next couple of years. We launched a bunch of industry first products, including hybrid electric walking and riding greens mowers that were drive-by-wire, steer-by-wire, cut-by-wire, lift-by-wire, full-blown hybrid electric. You could go and cut, I think it was 19 greens on a third of a gallon of diesel. And you could also run silent on a couple of holes if you were near houses. So that was fun. And that got some attention from around Textron. And long story short, Bell asked if I would come over to Bell and help do some of those same things.
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
So in 2010, I took a role as the chief engineer of Bell's commercial product lines. 206, 407, 429, and 412. Before I took the role, I said, hey guys, I'm a car and motorcycle guy and now a lawnmower guy. I don't really know a ton about, helicopters, technically speaking. And they said, that's okay. We have all the subject matter experts we need. We just need somebody to add some organization and get things moving relative to product development and things like that. So I did that for 2 years. And then 2 years later, they asked me to serve as the product line manager for those product lines, or the leader of the product management team. So I did that. 2 years later, they asked me and a small group of people to leave our full-time jobs and help figure out why Bell's commercial aftermarket business was starting to decline, and it had been for a few years. So took that assignment. And over the next 9 months, we shared our findings and solutions with the executive leadership team. And then they said, all right, great. Now you guys are in charge of the commercial aftermarket business at Bell. So that's when I kind of fell into the aftermarket side, and in large part what led to the first role that I had here at MD. So my teams were responsible in that role for supply and demand planning of all the parts that we sold to the field with fleet data, warranty process, repair and overhaul, pricing, and Bell's Power by the Hour program, which was, not really much at the time. We only had 30 aircraft on plan, but we had 10,000 aircraft out in the field. So we completely revamped that program, which is now known as the Customer Advantage Plan, and, did a lot of good stuff there. And then in 2018, Bell's president and CEO, John Garrison, left for another opportunity. There was a changing of the guard, and at that point, I kind of ended my 24-year run with Textron, and I moved to Arizona and joined Honeywell Aerospace, where I led a team of folks who managed a bunch of the avionics product lines, all of their displays, flight management systems, and flight controls. And then in the summer of 2022, the phone rang, and it was a recruiter who said my name came up in a couple of circles as somebody who could help MD fix their aftermarket. And a month later, I took the job, and I took it on August 15th of 2022, which coincidentally was the same day that MDH LLC was established from the former MDH Inc. And so I was in that role for 2.5 years. We grew the aftermarket by 115% in just 2 years. And then middle of last year, 2024, we needed to make a business level pivot for a couple of reasons. And I was asked to move into my current role as president and CEO. So sorry for the long-winded story, but it was kind of a weird path that brought me here. But, I'm extremely happy to be here. And, it is such a cool product and has such a great following. I feel really fortunate to be in this role.
I feel like you could do an entire podcast just on your background. Very impressive. I'm always amazed when I hear a resume like that, because it's like, it doesn't even seem like you're old enough, honestly, to be able to have so many experiences, right? Like, it's incredible what humans can do. And I think that's one of the cool things with our listenership, is that if you're a young person and you're listening to this podcast, what I take from that is being flexible, right? And being open and taking opportunity when it knocks at your door, when your company tells you, hey, move to this division and then go to this division. It can be stressful, but I think, being nimble, being flexible, and even probably willing to even fake it till you make it sometimes. I know that I've done that a lot, is really important. So, Ryan, what an honor again to just have you on. I'm going to touch right into one of the things that you originally brought on to MD in 2022 regarding the aftermarket issues that MD was experiencing at that time. What were those issues, and what did you and your team identify to be able to start digging MD out of that issue, and where is it now today, where we currently stand?
The biggest issue was our supply chain was busted, over the years, and it probably had something to do with the bankruptcy, but based on, what I've gathered over the years, not entirely. And maybe we can talk on that a little bit later too. Yes, MD did go through a bankruptcy in 2022, but it wasn't because we were completely broke. It was because we belonged to a broader portfolio of companies that was ordered to sell off all of its assets to repay its lenders. And so all of the companies that belonged to that particular entity were forced to go through a bankruptcy sale. So we just had to go through the process, and we came out the other side as an LLC instead of an Inc. But, when we looked at what the problem was, in large part, we had run off a lot of our suppliers. We weren't communicating effectively with our suppliers. when I got here, I said to the aftermarket team, and this was based on experience at Bell and Jacobson and other places, okay, guys, do we have a 5-year demand plan down to the part number that we've communicated with our suppliers? And the answer was no. And I said, well, that's the first step. And while we're doing that, we also need to consider that, the 80-20 rule, right? 80%, 20% of your parts are going to generate 80% of your revenue, or said another way, looking at it from the customer standpoint, 20% of the parts will satisfy 80% of the customer's needs. So we looked at that and we said, listen, of the parts that using revenue is kind of a basis, the parts that generate 90% of our revenue, we should never be out of those. And those are about 1,000 unique part numbers. So we made a focused effort to make sure that we got healthy on those 1,000 part numbers. And moving forward, we never want to be out of those. And furthermore, like a lot of other companies do, if an order is placed by 2:00 on a given day, that if it's one of those 1,000 part numbers, they're the never out part numbers, it will ship out that same day. We're still working on that particular piece of it, but over the last, 3 years at this point, we have generally gotten healthy on all 1,000 of those parts plus some. We still have some challenges like all other OEMs in the industry. Castings are a big problem these days. Bearings are a big problem these days. So, that's kind of touch and go. But the primary reason that we enjoyed so much success or such a big turnaround in the first 2 years was just reestablishing supply, bringing new suppliers on board, communicating with the suppliers, sharing with them the 5-year demand plan, and then away we go. That's part of what led to it.
Yeah, that supply issue, like you talked about, is prevalent across the industry, not isolated to any one OEM or even part supplier. We had a panel conversation on just that topic at the Vertical and Row conference, and everybody that was on the panel was from a different part of the industry, and across the board, it's an issue. It's looking for a resolution. So I commend you guys for making progress in that part of the industry where so many folks are struggling. That's a big accomplishment in my mind. I want to go back briefly to the leadership part of this conversation, because I always find that to be really interesting and inspiring, like Halsey had brought up. And you held a lot of roles and got a lot of experience and a lot of different things. You never really set out, from what it sounds like, to get to the position you're in now. But looking backwards, what's the one thing that you can look at and be like, this was part of what made my journey successful? Because a lot of people say, this is where I want to go, but don't exactly know how to get there. So I think it's interesting to kind of deconstruct some of these things in the rearview mirror.
Yeah, I'd say it's a handful of things, and you already hit on one of them. I think it was my willingness and my ability to accept new roles, which often require relocating to another state. So aside from the state I was born in, this is the 7th state that I've worked in, and most of that was with Textron. So being able and willing to move around makes a big difference. My willingness to change industries was part of it. And boy, let me tell you, that was not easy. In fact, this particular job, when I came to MD, it was the first time that I had not changed industries like my entire career when I moved. And I didn't have to move physically either, because I was already here in the Phoenix area. But I remember my first day at Bell, after having spent years in automotive and then years in outdoor power equipment. And I was in a conference room with a bunch of the engineering leaders, and we were talking about all kinds of things. And the acronyms that were flying out of their mouths, I just internally, I started laughing, because I have no idea what language these guys are speaking. So it's hard, but you'll get through it. And like you said, fake it till you make it. I once had a boss say, listen, you're never going to be 100% qualified for any job, especially at the level above you. But if you think you're about 80% prepared, that's prepared enough. Go for it. So there's that too. My willingness to undertake jobs that require, fixing broken things. Rarely do we move into a job where it's all going perfect, right? The reason they're looking for somebody for the job is because things are not working out. And so you got to be willing to do that. I think my drive to win at whatever I'm doing, at the end of the day, just like in sports, it's ultimately a competition, and somebody's got to win. And so might as well be us, right? And then lastly, and most importantly, it's the people around you. So as hard as we work as individuals at anything in life, almost nobody makes it to the big leagues without a ton of support from other people. So that's probably the biggest one.
Yeah, that was what kind of struck me. You talked about surrounding yourselves with SMEs when you came into the aviation side, because that wasn't where you were from. And I think that's one of the things we find that most leaders that are good leaders do well. They surround themselves with folks that are better than them, and they rely on their expertise and knowledge to propel them forward as they go on their journey. One thing I'm interested in talking about is your automotive background. In addition to that, I think in aviation, a lot of times we look at other industries and say, how do we take what's successful in these other industries? And automotive is one I think we look at a lot. And how do we adopt that to our industry to propel us forward? How has your experience in the automotive sector kind of influenced your position and some of your processes in the aviation industry?
Well, in aviation in particular, it's done differently. So having kind of grown up in the auto industry, when we went to, what the word's called validate in automotive, and we use it differently here in aerospace. And that's the funny thing too. Words are used differently across different industries. But when we design something in automotive and we go to validate it, it means that we basically put it through tests to make sure that it will, that door the hinges on that door are capable of opening and closing 8 times a day for 7 years. And what do you mean 7 years? Well, that's on average the amount of time that the average person keeps a new car. And so you want to keep them happy during that time frame so they'll come back to your brand. So you design everything so that it'll last through that first cycle of ownership and you keep them coming back to your brand. So we would physically cycle test all this stuff, put it in salt fog chambers, the whole 9 yards. It was very extensive. And I kind of thought that's the only way to do it. So I go to Jacobson, and Jacobson was kind of 20 years behind the times on that front. So I basically brought in all of the automotive design and test methodologies that I learned in automotive. And when I came to Bell or went to Bell, I discovered that, I didn't really have a feel for the magnitude of the differences in costs, and largely a function of volume, right? When you're only making somewhere between, say, 20 and 200 or something a year, it's a lot different than making 56 million of something a year. And that's on average how many vehicles have been manufactured per year over the last couple of decades. So there's economies of scale there. And what I discovered in rotorcraft land is that a lot of that stuff is done through simulation as opposed to physical testing. So it was kind of different. So I had to adapt in that way. But I think one of the things that I've carried throughout my career that I kind of latched onto in automotive is it's important to regularly update and refresh your products. And if you're not doing that, they're getting stale and people are going to move on to other things. And so, we practiced that at Jacobson. We looked at the average age of each of the products in our portfolio by product line, compared it to Toro and Deere, and saw that on average, our stuff was like 8 years old. And so we knew we had to revamp it because we saw that purchasing, in the purchasing cycle, there was, a big wave of people buying new stuff, and then it falls off after that. So you have to be regularly refreshing your products. And so when I got to Bell, we were doing the same thing, right? We laid out the 50 things on the wish list that customers wanted on the 407, the 429, and the 412. And we basically ran it through a process in which, we determined that one will not only help customers out the most and add value to the aircraft, but financially it would be good for us too. And then we go on and we knock off, a couple of those projects a year, and we continue to build on it. So fast forward a little bit and come to MD, and it's the same setup, right? Fortunately, there were a lot of concepts that were tested over the years on the 500 series, and they've just been sitting around collecting dust. And as it turns out, customers have been asking for that stuff for years. So time to start doing upgrades on these aircraft. And we'll get into maybe another subject later on that topic. But if that answers your question, I think one of the things that is most important is that no matter what kind of a product you're working on, you have to be refreshing it on a regular basis and keep it current. And so that's what we're doing right now.
Question that I have kind of regarding that, and great response, by the way. When I hear you say this, what validation, the car industry, one of the things that I've heard recently is that there's a lot of money specifically from the car industry being poured into, say, like eVTOL. And one of the issues I think with that is that maybe car people, executives of these big car brands included, are familiar with, say, the validation process, or maybe what we would call more of a certification process.
Mm-hmm.
and it being maybe even more simple in automotive. I'm not an automotive guy, so I can't say that for certain. But one of the things that I feel is plaguing the industry and actually stifling OEM's abilities to innovate is this idea of actually being able to certify something with the FAA. And I know that that's been a continued bottleneck. So how do you guys at MD navigate the complexity and the bureaucracy of certification with the goal of innovation and revamping your products?
Thank you to our sponsor, BLR Aerospace. BLR Aerospace's revolutionary fast fin system improves performance and enhances safety across various helicopter platforms. This cutting-edge aftermarket solution improves tail rotor effectiveness, stability, and payload capacity while reducing fuel consumption and pilot fatigue. Trusted globally, FastFin delivers unmatched control, efficiency, and reliabilities for diverse helicopter operations. Learn more at blraerospace.com.
So the difference between like automotive and outdoor power equipment compared to aviation is you effectively self-certify in those other two industries. You don't need somebody like the FAA blessing everything. Whereas in aviation, we have regulatory agencies for a good reason, in large part, to help ensure that everything that we manufacture and deliver is safe. So the FAA, it's widely known, and it's one of the things that we talk about when we meet on an annual basis, actually more than that, with the General Aviation Manufacturers Association. And we need more assistance from the FAA. And in their defense, they're resource constrained. They've lost a lot of seasoned talent in the last couple of years due to early retirements. And so, it's a combination of, is there really enough resources there? Are they willing to lean forward to start to adopt new technology? You'll hear most of the folks in the aviation industry, especially, the likes of Garmin and others, say, hey, listen, there are so many more things that we can do with our technology, but we need to get the FAA to buy into it. And so we need to cooperate more, and we need more resources. Every May, the General Aviation Manufacturers Association gets, all of us board members together, which I think there are somewhere around 100 board members, and we bust into groups of 6 to 8 people, and we go run around Capitol Hill, and we have half-hour meetings with 8 to 9 House of Representative members and senators, and we all go out with the same 3 talking points. And this year it was, one of them was, we need your help with adding more resources to the FAA to help us move faster, to help us incorporate, more innovation, more technology. And, comparing that to automotive, you guys know that in automotive, you'll get a refresh on a product, every couple of years. Every year they're adding something to that model. And then 4 to 6 years later, they replace the entire thing. Whereas in aviation with helicopters, we have a lot of designs and aircraft out there that are 40, 50, 60 years old. And not much has been done to them along the way, because it is so cost and time prohibitive to get those changes made to that product, that it's easier just to let it be. And then next time you introduce, say, a new long line single into the market, you just do all your changes then. So I remember when I got to Bell, we were around a 407, and then somebody said, yeah, we keep getting, the rear doors keep showing as they're open when you're flying, but really they're not. And I said, why not? And they opened the door, and they said, well, because this plunger here, when you're in the aircraft and there's vibration and it's fluttering. And I thought, you're using a door plunger like used to be in, our vehicles, not a plunger, but the mechanical door switch that was in vehicles, back in the 70s, right? And it was still, there I was in 2010, and it was in a 407. I'm like, guys, why haven't you gone to an electromagnetic proc switch? We use those in the turf car industry to sense where the lift system is on the reel mowers. And so just, there is a lot that we could be doing to integrate new technology and more technology. But of course, we need help from the FAA to get that done.
I promise. Last question, John and Brent. I promise. I can't help myself. I'm curious to hear, when you go, and I've had the pleasure of having some folks on, say, from M.B.A. that go and advocate for us on Capitol Hill, ranging from a wide range of, helicopter specific issues and things arising. But when you're going into talking to our elected officials, what is their response? I mean, do they actually comprehend kind of the bottleneck of all of this and the issue? Do they kind of give you the, yeah, we hear you, but it's not going to change? I mean, what is the general vibe that you get from our elected officials in understanding this idea of certification being such a bottleneck?
I think they all get it and they've all heard it. In these meetings, they're speed dating meetings, 20 minutes, and then they kick you out because they got somebody coming in right behind you. And this goes on for, all day and for weeks at a time, I'm sure. And so the big 3 points that we had this year was, the FAA. We need more resources, with the FAA. It's going to help us move faster. It's going to help the industry. Another one was air traffic control. It needs a major overhaul, not a secret to anybody. And so it's going to require investment. We need your assistance with that to help further the aviation industry. And then tariffs. I didn't know this until this last time around, but since 1979, aerospace has been operating under a tariff-free policy, basically. And so when we look at the tariffs that we're, looking to impose on all the other countries, and we've been working through this, since the new administration came online, right? We were looking at potentially significantly increasing the cost of the aircraft, especially those manufactured here, as we bring parts into the country and the stuff that we export too. Well, the message was kind of thanks, but no thanks. We are a net positive $120 billion industry for the U.S. So we don't need the tariffs. Please leave us in the Tax-Free Tariff Act from 1979 and let us operate that way. So going back to the FAA, nobody seems surprised by those requests. And so then the next step is for the bills to be served up and for appropriations to be made so that more resources are appointed to the FAA, to air traffic control. And that's all in the works right now.
I said that was my last question.
I was waiting. Thought you had a follow-up. So
I mean, I do, but I'm not going to ask you because I said it was my last question.
No, go ahead, Halsey. Go ahead.
No, I don't have any more follow-ups. I'm kidding. Go for it.
Ryan, sorry to keep going back to the leadership questions, but I really enjoy this conversation. I think a lot of folks on the Hangar Z podcast do is we have identified the one problem that most agencies have worldwide is leadership. So we try to identify, what does positive leadership look like, and how does somebody kind of work themselves into a position where they're trained leaders, I should say, because in law enforcement, what happens is you take a test on Friday, and on Monday you're promoted. Congratulations, you're a supervisor with very little, if any, training, right, Brent?
Absolutely. And I could tell you.
Look, they promoted Brent. I mean, that's all the case in point you need.
Yeah.
So it's a worldwide issue that we deal with. So I always look for positive leadership. You've worked your way into this position over the course of a long and fruitful career. Leadership styles. I talk about servant leadership a lot. I really like the idea or concept of servant leadership. What would you say? How would you identify or classify your leadership style, and how do you look to lead MD in particular?
Well, I'll kind of answer that with a story. I grew up playing sports and played sports through college, and so I frame most everything in life that way. And so years ago, while I was at some leadership training at Textron, everybody in the group was asked to describe the qualities of the best coach that they ever played for. And the responses were pretty much the same from everybody. It wasn't about how many games were won or lost. It was about what that coach did for the team and for each player. Somebody who significantly furthered your knowledge of the game, somebody who significantly improved your skill level, somebody who gave you a chance to perform, somebody who pushed you further than you thought you could go, somebody who kept the team grounded and focused, whether, we were winning or losing, and somebody who was, quick to point out mistakes and bring it to your attention, which is how we learn and get better. So those are, I always kind of frame it that way. And I try to be that kind of leader. I'm the head coach of this company, and my executive leadership team are the position coaches. So, I have a responsibility to make sure that each of the functions in the business are running properly. If they're not, I will go to that position coach. We will have conversations about it. It's important that they have the right talent and the right skill on the team. Talent being that those qualities we're born with, skill being the things that we learn. So we can't just bring people into a company and not teach them how to get better. That would be like putting a football team together, right? You don't practice. So, I try to use that those are the qualities that I try to demonstrate on a regular basis. In terms of leadership responsibilities, I always like the way that Scott Donnelly, the president and CEO of Textron, said it. I have two key responsibilities in this role: to set and communicate our direction, and to secure the resources needed to get there. So that's a little bit about, my approach to it. And I think to end up in a leadership role, it's a combination of a handful of things. It's, the breadth and the depth of experience that you've gathered over the years. It's the skills that you've developed. And I think it's also just, part, do you have the right personality? Is that inherent in your makeup to lead people, lead teams? And I always find it easy to take it back to, we're running a team here in a particular league, and, you got to know your competition. You got to know the rules of the game. You're going to win if you've got, the best talent and the best skill, and you've got the best game plan. And we approach it that way.
I love the sports analogy. I think there's so many parallels between the sports world and leadership. It's insane to me. With each conversation we have in the podcast, sports seems to be a focus of that part of the conversation. So love what you brought up there. Well, Halsey or Brent, any follow-up questions there?
Not a question, but I would parlay off what he said and the quality of a good leader and the difference it can make to those that he's leading. And again, a quick story is I've had good, as you did, John, in your police career, I've had good supervisors and I've had bad supervisors. And I had one that fell on the ladder of that. And I told him one time, I said, it can compare him to a different supervisor. I said, this other supervisor, I would, for you, I would fight to do something that you told me to do that I wanted to do. But for this other guy, I would volunteer to do something I didn't want to do because he was such a good leader and he set by example. And so to have somebody, and in aviation, as you know as well, John, we don't always have somebody who's experienced in aviation as a supervisor over a aviation unit. But that isn't always a necessity too. Some of the best supervisors I ever had in my aviation career, especially, were guys that didn't know which side of the helicopter the spinny thing went on. So, but they knew how to lead the people. They knew exactly what you said, Ryan. One of their key things was they recognized, I don't know what these guys are doing. I don't know their job. I'm not going to pretend to know the job, but I know I need to get them the resources that they need to be able to do their job. And so the best supervisor, the best managerial positions that in the police department have been guys that knew how to get what we needed to have to do our job properly.
Yeah, we had a conversation with the sergeant of the Nashville Metro Police Department Air Support Unit, and he had a list of 8 things that pertain to leadership. And number 1 and number 8 were take care of your people. And I like how that bookended each segment within there. So when you take care of your people, you're doing exactly what you said, Ryan. You're providing them the resources to allow the team to win, in that coaching analogy. So love that. Thanks for spending some time on the leadership concepts with me. I think it's a super valuable part of the conversation. I'd like to shift gears and go into MD and where you guys are now and kind of where you're going from here. So I'll just kind of open that up as a pretty open-ended question. Where is MD now, and where do you see MD going as we progress?
You protect and defend. So do we. Astronautics' proven cybersecurity, connectivity, and upgrade solutions support helicopter OEMs and operators worldwide. When the mission matters, you need to trust that your avionics systems are secure, connected, and reliable because lives depend on it. Continue to protect and defend. So will we. Contact Astronautics at www.astronautics.com.
That gives me a chance to circle back to something I was going to mention a while ago. We were talking about, are there models that might go back in production? I think the short answer is yes, there are. So where are we headed? What are we focused on? You have to make hay when in the areas that you can make hay in. And one of the big opportunities for us right now is the aftermarket, and not only reviving the aftermarket, which I think most will tell you we've done, but also, improving the fielded fleet, doing these upgrades. And so, I've learned that at least within aviation, OEMs can often be reluctant to offer a significant amount of fielded fleet upgrades because they're worried that's going to cannibalize sales of new aircraft. And sometimes that is justified. But, I always believe that, listen, if you're not doing things to improve your product, and you're not willing to cannibalize your own sales, rest assured somebody else is going to cannibalize it. So you need to get in there and do something about it, keep improving it. But there are times when maybe that's not your best interest. Let's say, for example, you launch a helicopter with a new glass cockpit. And let's say there are 1,000 of those aircraft out in the field with analog cockpits. Well, you probably don't want to come out with that new glass cockpit kit, upgrade kit right away, because you do want to maximize on new aircraft sales. But as we see with the introduction of any new product, there's, a curve, and it climbs for a while and then it tapers off. And so I think the smart move there would be sell new aircraft for a couple of years, and, new aircraft orders will go, they will go up significantly in this one scenario I'm referring to going back about 15 years. But once that curve peaks and new aircraft sales start to come down, release that kit so the people out in the field can do the upgrade. So not only as a business will you and the network make more money that way, grow incremental revenue and profit, but also you're adding value to the aircraft. You're keeping people in your aircraft. They're flying it more. And within this industry, as it comes to the aftermarket, the size of your aftermarket is highly, highly correlated with flight hours. It all comes down to flight hours. And if you got 1,000 aircraft flying 300 hours a year on average, as opposed to 200 hours a year, you're going to be making, 33% or 50% more revenue on, the aftermarket parts and repairs and stuff that are needed. So, there's an element of that because we for years have been a low volume manufacturer, unlike a Bell or a Robinson or an Airbus helicopters. We don't benefit from, economies of scale. When you're only making, a dozen or a couple dozen aircraft a year, we don't get the kind of price breaks that those OEMs often get because they're ordering so many more parts a year. That makes our aircraft more expensive. And then after, we as the OEM, we carry a lot of overhead to do all the things that we do, we have to throw those burdens on there, and then we put some profit on there. It makes our small, short, light single aircraft priced around the same, price as a Bell 407 or an Airbus 125, which arguably has more utility and thus more value at the same price. So we're a little constrained on that side. And, until we get a sizable order, say from a couple of foreign militaries, or maybe, a handful of police departments, or, the Army trainer program which we're competing for, we're building aircraft to order as opposed to building aircraft and putting them out on a lot and hoping people are going to come buy those at a rather expensive price. But in the meantime, we have so much opportunity in the aftermarket with all these upgrades that's where we are turning a lot of our attention and, working on, improving what we already have.
Before we get into the upgrades, because I really wanted to get into that, the law enforcement units that we talk to, a lot of which were flying MD products, have slowly gone to other products for a whole host of reasons. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of agencies that want to fly MD products. For the patrol mission, it's one of the best platforms that exist. Talking about the agility, speed, performance of the MD 500, there's really not a whole lot, there's not many aircraft that compete like that MD does. I never flew it in patrol, but Brent, I know you did. What was your experience flying that in patrol as compared to anything else?
Again, it was my initial. It was what I learned to fly on. So I didn't fly Robinsons. I got a couple hours in the 300Cs, but other than that, that was what I was used to. That's what I think I got spoiled, and I thought, okay, this is what everybody's flying. This is what everybody learns to fly in, and this is what all the patrol agencies around the country are flying in. And then as I got more exposure to the industry, I realized, no, that's not the case. And as I flew other airframes, and again, like Ryan pointed out, there are other airframes that have advantages that or things they can do that the MD might not be able to do. But they also have shortcomings that the MD feels that they can't. And so as my my resume filled with other aircraft that I've flown, it almost always goes back to that's kind of my my starting point of, okay, well, how does this aircraft compare to what I learned to fly, and how does it compare to an MD? What can this aircraft do that an MD can't? And more often than not, like you said, it is a favored aircraft, and I think I told Ryan, I said, last time I was there, I think is when the Powerball was hitting like $3 billion or something, and I said, Ryan, if I win this, you're getting a call on Monday morning, because of all the aircraft I've flown, that's what I'm buying. That's the aircraft that I'm going back to, and I don't think it's just because of that's what I learned on, and that's what I was the most familiar with. Because honestly, I've got many more hours in many other aircraft than I do in the MD product, but that's still at the heart for me, and the capability of it that it offers for a police agency within its niche that it fulfills. Not many others can do what it can do in those situations. And for a patrol aircraft, especially for a multi-fleet agency, there's few that I would want to see flying, or that I would want to fly over that. That would be my aircraft of choice.
Yeah, I think for a lot of the reasons you just talked about, a lot of agencies that have selected MD 500s as their patrol platform want to stick with that. So for those agencies who are wanting to, add to their fleet, replace aging aircraft, what does that look like today at MD for a new agency or an existing agency to come in and say, I'd like to order X number of helicopters? What does that look like for you guys?
We go through the normal process with them. One of the challenges with U.S. police departments is their municipalities have rules that say you're not allowed to give anybody a dime until you take delivery of the product. Whereas like with individual operators or foreign militaries in particular, we can ask for a significant deposit up front to help pay for the millions and millions of dollars of materials that we have to put on order with our suppliers, which all have very long lead times. So it's a little bit of a catch-22 situation. We'd like to be building aircraft to a forecast, hoping that people come buy it. But as a smaller company, at several $1 million a pop, we can't afford to, put 20 of them out on the lot, because we would have tied up $60 million of capital, and that's just not the smart, financial thing to do. So it's a little bit of back and forth, and we're actively talking with some of those police departments probably that you're referring to, who are interested in buying one next year and one 3 years from now. And they want a commitment that we're going to be, able to deliver an aircraft at that time. So we try to work it through it with them with some type of, down payment up front, and just work it from there. And once they can get a commitment from their municipalities that they're going to get the funding, then it makes the process go a little bit, a little bit faster.
If you don't mind, John, I have a quick follow-up for you, for Ryan on that. There is, as you're aware, the Phoenix Police Department went to a different brand because of the parts issues. And you guys, as you and I have talked at length, Ryan, you guys are conquering a lot of those aftermarket support issues. Is that parlaying over into more interest from those law enforcement agencies that want to be flying MD products? They're saying, hey, people were leaving MD because of parts issues, but they're fixing the parts issues, so let's look at them again. Are you seeing that reaction?
Yeah, to some extent. I will say we don't have any police department showing up saying, I want to buy 5 helicopters right now because we hear you guys fixed everything. But to your point, a lot of this, was self-imposed. We over the past 20 years, and arguably a little longer than that, going back to the McDonnell Douglas days, if we go way back, the Hughes Helicopters team, they did just amazing stuff. And then I give McDonnell Douglas a lot of credit, who bought MD in '84 or bought Hughes. They also did a lot of great stuff over the decade and a half that they had the company. They continued to invest in the product, to develop things. And then in 97, I believe 99, it was sold to Boeing. And then they didn't want any part of the commercial business units. So they sold it all off a couple of years later to a private equity company from in Europe. They kept it for 4 years. Their focus was on the 902. I'll come back to your question in a second. And, this is all part of, we started to lose focus, right? They were big in the 902 because, twin engines are big in Europe and singles not so much. So the neglect of the 500 series, I think, started then. And then, in comes new ownership in 2004. And I would say the focus of that leader and those teams over the following, 15 years was more along the lines of, let's just go win some big military contracts. And I get it. Those are very lucrative and it can get you a lot of, helicopter sales and many, many years of support. But we continue to neglect the fielded fleet and the aftermarket. And we just, the folks in charge, I think, didn't really place as much value on it as they should have. And so, when I came in 3.5 years ago, company level, that was among the top 5 priorities. We have to fix the aftermarket if we ever want to start, selling a bunch of aircraft, in bigger volumes again. And so we've done that. And I can tell you that Brett can probably tell you this too. When we went to that first New Zealand fly-in in February of 2023, I got an earful about your support sucks. It's terrible. It's the worst. And it was deserved, right? And so we set off on fixing that. And 2 years later, when we went back to the second great Kiwi fly-in, the conversation was completely different. Dan Searcy, our VP of aftermarket now, and I went, and we didn't hear a single piece of feedback about I can't get parts anymore. The conversation changed to, when are you going to soup up my ride? When can I get that kit that makes my aircraft go, 300 miles an hour? I'm exaggerating, right? But it was all about the possibilities as opposed to all the, the damage we'd caused over the previous 25 years.
We're just going to take that soundbite and run with that 300 miles per hour, by the way.
What you're talking about is huge because, as we know, a lot of governmental agencies don't have the financial ability to go out and buy new aircraft. They're forced to retrofit what they've got to maintain their fleet, or they're trying to get into the air support game without spending $7 million for a completely mission outfitted helicopter. So what folks are looking at now is MD-500s that may have been used now have the support of those parts from you guys now, in addition to the upgrades. So I feel like agencies have this new option now to get into aircraft for less than a new version that can do the jobs they want. So let's kind of go into the 530N and the revitalization of that, and what some of those upgrades look like for those agencies that might be able to slide into that kind of that example. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Hangar Z podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories that promote the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Lastly, stand by for a message after a word from our sponsors. Cheers.
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
Thank you to our sponsor, BLR Aerospace. BLR Aerospace's revolutionary fast fin system improves performance and enhances safety across various helicopter platforms. This cutting-edge aftermarket solution improves tail rotor effectiveness, stability, and payload capacity while reducing fuel consumption and pilot fatigue. Trusted globally, FastFin delivers unmatched control, efficiency, and reliabilities for diverse helicopter operations. Learn more at blraerospace.com.
You protect and defend. So do we. Astronautics' proven cybersecurity, connectivity, and upgrade solutions support helicopter OEMs and operators worldwide. When the mission matters, you need to trust that your avionics systems are secure, connected, and reliable, because lives depend on it. Continue to protect and defend. So will we. Contact Astronautics at www.astronautics.com.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Hangar Z and Helicopter Podcast Mashup, brought to you by Vertical Helicast and in partnership with Vertical Valor Magazine. We had the unique opportunity to speak with Ryan Weeks, CEO of M.B.A Helicopters, and gain insights into the company's rich history, recent advancements, and exciting future. From the revitalization of the legendary MD 530N, now powered by the Rolls-Royce C30 engine, to the innovative MD Super D20B upgrade that enhances performance and payload, M.B.A Helicopters continues to push the boundaries in rotorcraft technology. These developments are designed to deliver greater power, safety, and reliability, ensuring that the fleet remains mission-ready even in the most challenging environments. A special thanks to Ryan Weeks, Halsey Scheider, and Brent Bundy, and all of you listeners for your continued support. Remember, this episode was recorded just a few days before the FAA approved the STC for the Super D20B, marking an important milestone for M.B.A and its operators. Stay tuned for more industry insights, innovative updates, and inspiring stories from the world of rotorcraft. Cheers.